There comes a point in your life when you realize something quietly devastating. You've been playing a game you never agreed to play, a game where someone else writes the rules, changes them halfway through, and then blames you for not keeping up. And for the longest time, you think it's love. You think it's loyalty. You tell yourself it's just being patient or understanding. But what it really is manipulation disguised as connection. See, trust is powerful. It's the foundation of every relationship, every team, every dream you've ever tried to build. But when you give it to the wrong person, someone who sees trust not as a gift but as a tool, that same power becomes your prison. And the scariest part, you won't even realize it's happening. Because narcissists don't take your power with force. They take it with charm, with empathy, with what looks like love. They play a game, a quiet, psychological chess match where every compliment, every apology, every story about their pain isn't about closeness. It's about control. And you think you're helping them heal. You think you're building something real. But what you're really doing is feeding a system that depends on your reactions. That's the game. They win when you explain yourself. They win when you rush to fix things. They win every time you second guess your memory, your instincts, your truth. You become so busy managing their emotions that you forget you have your own. And listen, this isn't about shame. This is about awareness. You didn't lose because you were weak. You lost because you were wired to care. You were raised to believe that trust is noble, that love conquers all, that understanding someone means forgiving them endlessly. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that trust is supposed to be mutual. You forgot that love without boundaries isn't love. It's self-erasure. So today, we're not talking about how to win their game. We're going to end it. Because when you see the rules clearly, the manipulation loses its magic. You'll start to hear the script. They repeat the patterns that once made you question yourself, and you'll know exactly what to do. You'll know when to pause. You'll know when to breathe. You'll know when to stop playing. There's something incredibly powerful that happens when you stop reacting and start recognizing. You shift from confusion to clarity, from being played to being aware. And that awareness, that's the beginning of freedom. Because once you see the game, you can't unsee it. You start noticing the tactics. You start spotting the traps. And suddenly, the person who once controlled your peace doesn't feel powerful anymore. They feel predictable. This next hour isn't about blaming them. It's about reclaiming you. It's about learning the 7 trust traps narcissists use to pull you in and the one simple 5-second counter that breaks every single one of them. Because once you understand how the game works, you stop being the player. You become the one who walks away not with anger, not with revenge, but with clarity. And clarity, my friends, is power. Have you ever met someone who, within the first hour, told you everything about their life, their childhood trauma, their heartbreak, their dreams, their fears, all poured out like you were lifelong soulmates? You sit there thinking, wow, we just connected so deeply. It feels intoxicating, like emotional lightning. But that's not lightning. That's a lure. Because what you're experiencing isn't intimacy. It's fast-forward intimacy. And it's one of the most seductive traps a narcissist will ever use. You see, healthy connection takes time. Trust is built in small, consistent steps through shared experiences, honesty, and respect. But when someone wants to control you, they skip the slow build. They know that real trust takes patience, and patience doesn't give them power fast enough. So they fake depth. They weaponize vulnerability. They flood you with stories of their pain, their loneliness, their bad luck in love. And before you know it, your empathy is hooked. You start thinking, they've been through so much, I can help. But that's the hook. They make you feel responsible for their healing. Here's the truth. Fast-forward intimacy isn't about getting to know you. It's about testing how much of yourself you'll give without boundaries. They'll tell you, I've never opened up like this to anyone before. And your brain lights up because who doesn't want to feel chosen, special, seen? But notice how the focus isn't really on you knowing them, it's on how you react. Do you comfort them? Do you match their vulnerability? Do you rush in to prove you're different from everyone who hurt them before? And the moment you do, they know exactly how to shape you. This is where the 5 second counter comes in. When you feel that emotional rush, that intensity that feels too soon, too deep, too fast, don't respond right away. Count down in your head. Fem, fire, tre, two, then pause. Because that pause is your power. It gives your nervous system time to settle. It lets your intuition catch up to your emotions. It stops you from revealing something personal just to match their vulnerability. It interrupts the autopilot that says, if they trust me, I should trust them back. No, you shouldn't. Not yet. Trust is earned, not offered like a discount. So the next time someone rushes closeness, overshares, love bombs, tells you you're the one, after 3 dates, I want you to remember this. If it's real, it won't need to be rushed. Fast forward intimacy feels flattering, but it's manipulation dressed as connection. Because real connection grows in silence, in pauses, in moments that aren't dramatic. It grows when both people feel safe enough to take their time. So when you feel that instant soul tie, I want you to hear my voice in your head saying, slow down. You're not cold. You're being conscious. Because the right person won't push for access. They'll earn it. And when you pause, when you take that 5 second breath instead of rushing in, you'll feel it. The calm click of clarity in your chest, the moment where you stop being the target and start being the observer. And that's how the game begins to break. There's a special kind of manipulation that doesn't look like manipulation at all. It looks like pain. It shows up as, you don't understand how hard my life has been. Or, everyone leaves me. Or, I've just been hurt too many times. And you, with your empathy, your big heart, your instinct to help you lean in, you start comforting, you start explaining, you start reassuring, because you were raised to believe that kindness is strength and that compassion heals everything. But here's the problem. When a narcissist uses pity as a hook, they're not asking for healing, they're asking for control. They're testing how quickly your empathy overrides your boundaries. You think you're building trust, but what you're really building is dependence. You start carrying their emotional baggage before you even realize it's not yours to carry. You start fixing problems that aren't yours to solve. You start walking on eggshells to avoid adding to their pain. And slowly, their suffering becomes your responsibility. That's the pity hook. It's not that they're always lying about their struggles. Often their stories are rooted in real pain. But they've learned something dangerous. That pain can be powerful currency. It earns attention. It buys loyalty. It gets people to stay when logic says they should walk away. And this is how you get caught in their orbit. You keep trying to prove that you're different, that you won't abandon them like everyone else did. But the more you try to prove that, the deeper the hook goes. So how do you break it? You use the 5 second counter. When you feel that surge of sympathy rising in your chest, that instinct to fix, to comfort, to overextend, I want you to pause. Count it out. Chamesh, arba, shalosh, shtaim, achat. Then ask one simple question. How are you handling that? Not how can I help? Not what can I do? Not I'm so sorry. Just how are you handling that? That one question does something profound. It hands responsibility back to where it belongs with them. If they're genuinely seeking connection, they'll appreciate it. They'll show accountability. But if they're manipulating, you'll see it instantly because they'll resist that ownership. They'll deflect, blame, or double down on their pain. That's your qui. You are not cold for refusing to fix someone who won't help themselves. You are not unkind for protecting your energy. You are not selfish for saying, that's not mine to carry. Compassion is beautiful, but compassion without boundaries becomes self-destruction. So the next time you feel that magnetic pull to rescue, remember this truth. You can care deeply without being consumed. The moment you pause, breathe, and ask, how are you handling that? That's the moment the pity hook loses its grip. You stop being their emotional caretaker and start being your own protector. And that shift right there, that pause, is the beginning of peace. Let's talk about one of the sneakiest trust traps out there, the compliment contract. You know it. It starts with charm. It sounds like flattery. It feels like warmth. They say things like, "You're nothing like my ex. You're the only one who really understands me. You're special. I can't believe I found someone like you." And you melt. You want to believe it because who doesn't? We all want to feel seen, valued, chosen. But with a narcissist, those words are not gifts, they're transactions. Every compliment comes with an invisible contract, a silent agreement that you never signed. When they say you're different, the unspoken message is, "So don't disappoint me." When they say you get me, what they really mean is, "Now you owe me understanding, even when I hurt you." And when they say you're the only one who can handle me, what they're setting up is isolation because suddenly no one else could ever measure up. That's not praise, that's programming. You start craving their approval like oxygen. You start performing to keep it. You start reading every tone shift, every silence, every look as a sign that maybe you did something wrong. And that's exactly how they tighten their control. Because once they make your worth dependent on their validation, they own the script. Here's what I need you to hear. Compliments are only safe when they're clean. A clean compliment is simple. It asks for nothing in return. But with a manipulator, every bit of praise is a test. Will you rush to please? Will you prove them right? Will you start earning what should have been freely given? So what do you do when that flood of flattery comes your way? You pause. Count it out. Chamesh, arba, shalosh, shtaim, achat. And instead of paying the compliment back or downplaying it or trying to live up to it, you just receive it. Smile. Say, "Thank you." Then stop talking. That silence breaks the contract. It tells your nervous system, "I don't owe anyone proof of my value." Because the moment you start performing for praise, you've already handed over control. Real connection doesn't require performance. Real love doesn't sound like, "You're the only one who understands me." It sounds like, "I want to understand you too." You can feel the difference. One binds you, the other frees you. So the next time someone showers you with over-the-top admiration early on, remember, if it feels like a spotlight, step out of it. You don't need their stage to shine. Your worth isn't measured by how brightly they see you. It's measured by how clearly you see yourself. That's how you break the compliment contract. That's how you take your validation back. And that right there is what real confidence feels like. Quiet, steady, and yours alone. There's a certain kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from work. It comes from trying to make sense of something that keeps changing shape. That's what it's like to be caught on the confusion carousel. 1 minute, they adore you. The next, they're distant. One day, you're the best thing that ever happened to them. The next, they're picking apart every word you say. You keep spinning in circles, trying to find the version of them that made you feel safe, the version you fell for. But here's the hard truth. That version was never consistent because it was never real. This is one of the narcissist's favorite tools. It's called intermittent reinforcement reward, withdrawal, reward again. It's psychological conditioning that trains your brain to chase stability inside chaos. Every inconsistency pulls you in deeper because now your focus isn't on your peace, it's on decoding them. They say something cruel, and when you finally react, they twist it. You're overreacting. That's not what I said. You always twist my words. And suddenly, you're not angry anymore. You're confused. You start replaying conversations in your head. You start apologizing just to end the tension. You start doubting your own memory. That's the carousel. You spin, they watch, and every spin drains your confidence just a little bit more. So how do you step off? You use the 5-second counter. When the confusion hits that dizzy feeling, when you start wondering, am I crazy? Did I mishear that? Stop. Count it down. Fem, fire, tre, to et. Then say this out loud, calmly, clearly. That's not what happened. And then stop talking. That silence is your exit ticket. Because the more you explain, the more material they have to twist. But the moment you name what you see without emotion, without defense, the carousel slows. They can't spin what you won't fuel. It's not your job to convince someone to stop gaslighting you. It's your job to recognize when it's happening and walk away from the argument altogether. Here's the truth you need to anchor in. Confusion is not a sign to try harder. It's a sign to step back. When communication leaves you more lost than before, you're not in a relationship, you're in a manipulation loop. So from now on, every time you feel your stomach drop, every time you start doubting yourself, every time you catch yourself over-explaining, I want you to pause, count down, and state one sentence of truth. That's not aggression. That's alignment. Because clarity doesn't scream, it doesn't chase, it simply stands. And when you stand firm in your reality, you stop spinning, you step off the carousel, steady on your own 2 feet, and the world stops blurring. That's when you realize it wasn't your memory that was broken. It was their integrity. And that realization, that's peace. Let's talk about one of the most draining experiences in the world, being stuck in a conversation where every sentence somehow becomes your fault. You start with a simple boundary or a concern or even just a feeling, and before you know it, you're knee-deep in an emotional courtroom. They're defending, accusing, twisting, and you're trying to explain, to clarify, to make them understand. That's the trap. The misunderstood monologue. This is when a narcissist pretends that your disagreement isn't about right or wrong, it's about how you failed to get them. They'll say, "You just don't understand me." You're taking it the wrong way. You always assume the worst about me. And what do? You explain harder. You slow down your words. You bring up examples. You twist yourself into knots trying to be understood because deep down, you believe that clarity will bring peace. But here's the truth. You can't reason with someone who's not arguing for truth. They're arguing for control. They don't want understanding. They want submission. They want you to backtrack, apologize, and restore the version of them that always has the upper hand. And while you're trying to show empathy, they're gathering data, learning exactly which words make you unravel, which tone makes you doubt yourself, which story keeps you stuck explaining your heart to someone who's never really listening. So what do you do when they pull the "you just don't understand me" card? You count down fem, fire, tre, tu, et, and you say, "Maybe I don't." Then stop talking. That line right there, "maybe I don't," is your boundary in a sentence because it removes the hook. It says, "I don't need to chase your approval to know my truth." It's the verbal equivalent of stepping out of the tug of war. And yes, they'll be thrown off. They might accuse you of not caring, of being cold, of giving up, but you're not giving up. You're growing up. You're realizing that understanding someone doesn't mean surrendering your perspective. Healthy communication can only exist when both sides listen. But in this dynamic, there's only one voice that ever gets heard, theirs. And every time you fight to be understood, you're feeding the very cycle that keeps you invisible. So stop fighting for your point. Start standing in your peace. You don't need to convince anyone of what's true when you already know it. And here's the miracle that happens when you practice this. The silence that follows, "maybe I don't," isn't empty. It's powerful. It's you stepping back into your own authority. Because sometimes the most radical act of self-trust is refusing to explain your worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. That's not arrogance. That's alignment. And that alignment, that calm, quiet certainty is what separates you from the chaos they depend on. You stop needing them to understand you. You start understanding yourself. And that's how you begin to win a game you never asked to play. Let's talk about one of the oldest, most manipulative games in the book, the jealousy triangle. It's that subtle mention of someone else, the ex, the coworker, the friend, that lands like a knife wrapped in silk. They say something small. "You should have seen how well she handled that project. He gets me in a way you just don't. It's funny, my ex used to do that too, but better." And you feel it, that sting, that tension in your chest. You don't say anything at first, but suddenly you're thinking about it. You start comparing yourself, questioning yourself, wondering if you're doing something wrong. That's not coincidence. That's calculation. See, narcissists use jealousy not because they want love, but because they want control. They know that if they can make you compete for their attention, they never have to offer emotional safety. They can sit back while you chase. They can feel powerful while you prove. That's the triangle. Them, you, and a third imaginary rival who exists only to keep you insecure. You'll notice the pattern. They light the match, then act innocent when the fire starts. They'll say, "You're overreacting," or "You're so jealous." And now you're defending your reaction instead of confronting their provocation. That's how they shift the spotlight from their behavior to your emotions. You become the problem, and they become the victim of your insecurity. But you're not insecure. You're responding to intentional chaos. Here's what I want you to remember. Confidence isn't the absence of emotion, it's the control of response. And that's exactly where your power comes in. When they drop that jealous seed, the name, the story, the subtle dig pause, count it out. Chamesh, arba, shalosh, shtaim, achet. And instead of taking the bait, breathe, smile, then change the subject or walk away. You don't owe them a reaction because every time you stay calm, you break their rhythm. They can't play power games with someone who refuses to compete. Neutrality confuses manipulators. They thrive on your emotional spike, the argument, the tears, the over-explaining. But when you respond with calm detachment, they lose the script. Here's a truth most people miss. Indifference isn't cold, it's conscious. You're not being distant, you're being deliberate. When you stop engaging in comparison, you take away their stage. When you stop proving your worth, you take back your energy. So the next time someone tries to spark jealousy, don't play defense, play observation. Notice the tone. Notice your body's reaction. Notice the attempt to unbalance you. And then decide, no, not this time. That's your power move. That's your calm authority. That's you stepping out of the triangle altogether. Because the truth is, you were never in competition. You were in a conversation that wasn't honest. And the moment you realize that, you stop fighting for attention and start protecting your peace. That's what they can't handle, a person who doesn't flinch. Because calm, my friends, is kryptonite to control. Now let's talk about one of the most deceptive trust traps, the future fake promise. This one doesn't come wearing red flags. It comes wearing hope. It sounds like, once I get through this busy phase, we'll travel. Next month, I'll be better. We just need to get through this rough patch, and then everything will change. And you believe it because you want to, because you've invested time, love, and energy, and the idea that it might all pay off keeps you holding on. That's the brilliance and the cruelty of the future fake promise. It gives you just enough light to stay in the dark. They feed you visions of the life you'll have one day, but that day never arrives because the promise isn't meant to come true. It's meant to keep you patient. It's not a roadmap. It's a leash. Every time you start to pull away, they dangle another tomorrow. Every time you ask for consistency, they promise it's coming soon. And slowly, you stop asking for accountability. You start waiting instead, and waiting is how they win. Because while you're waiting for potential, you're ignoring patterns. That's what future faking really is, emotional debt that never gets paid. They'll sprinkle in just enough progress to keep you hopeful. A good day, a kind message, a sweet gesture, and you think, maybe this time it's real. But if you look closely, it's always the same loop. And every loop costs you a little more of yourself. So how do you break the illusion? You use the 5-second counter. When they start painting the picture of some grand future, that trip, that change, that commitment, pause, count, fem, fire, tre, tu, et. Then ask one question, calmly, directly, and without apology. What step happens now? Not next month, not someday, not after they figure things out. Now, because real intention shows up in action, not fantasy. When you ask what step happens now, you pull the conversation out of illusion and into reality. And manipulators hate reality because it exposes their emptiness. Watch how they respond. If they get defensive, vague, or irritated, that's your answer. The future they're selling is a distraction, not a direction. The moment you stop buying promises and start asking for plans, you shift the power. You stop being the believer. You become the observer. And I know this one hurts because the hardest thing to let go of isn't the person, it's the version of the future you built in your mind. You weren't naive. You were hopeful. But hope without evidence is captivity. You deserve promises that come with proof. You deserve plans that have presence, not just potential. So from now on, when someone paints you a dream, don't get lost in the colors. Ask for the brushstroke that starts it. Because real love, real commitment, real change, they don't live in someday. They live in today. And if today is full of excuses, manipulation, and empty words, that's not your future. That's your cue. The day you stop waiting for next time is the day you reclaim your time. And that's the end of their illusion. Because when you stop holding space for empty promises, you start making room for peace. Now, let's talk about your greatest tool, the thing that breaks every single trap we've just talked about. It's simple, but it's revolutionary. It's the 5-second rule. And no, this isn't about motivation or getting out of bed or making a phone call, though it works for those too. This is about emotional triggers, the split-second reactions that manipulators depend on. Because every one of these traps, the pity hook, the confusion carousel, the future fake, they all rely on one thing, your reaction. They push your buttons, and before you know it, you're explaining, defending, rescuing, chasing. You think you're responding with logic, but you're reacting from survival. So here's how the 5-second rule changes everything. The moment you feel that rush, the anxiety in your chest, the anger in your throat, the urge to text back, explain, or fix you, count down. When, se, sen, a, yen. And in that tiny window, something incredible happens. You take your brain off autopilot. You interrupt the trigger. You shift from reaction to choice. That's not just emotional control. That's nervous system mastery. When you count, you're signaling to your brain, we're safe. We don't need to respond to this chaos. You reclaim your energy. You re-engage the part of your mind that makes conscious decisions. And that pause, that's where power lives. Because narcissists thrive on urgency. They want you impulsive, emotional, and off balance. They want to provoke so they can control. But when you pause, you become unpredictable. And unpredictability to a manipulator is power. So I want you to start practicing it everywhere, not just in toxic interactions. Practice it with emails, with arguments, with that friend who always drains your energy, with yourself. When you start spiraling into self-blame, fem, fire, tre, tu, et, pause, that countdown is your emotional firewall. It's you saying, I get to decide how I show up. And the more you practice it, the faster your peace returns. Because peace isn't found after the chaos, it's found in the moment you refuse to fuel it. This is the pivot point. It's the moment when your nervous system starts to trust you again. Because let's be honest, it's not that you didn't see the red flags. It's that your emotions got hijacked before your logic could catch up. But not anymore. From now on, every time you feel that surge, the guilt, the panic, the fear of losing someone who keeps hurting you, you count down. You breathe. You choose calm. And in doing so, you build a new pattern. A pattern of control. A pattern of peace. A pattern that says, my reactions belong to me now. Because the truth is, your healing isn't found in how they change, it's found in how you respond when they don't. And the 5-second rule, that's your bridge. It takes you from being triggered to being in charge. Here's where everything changes. Up until now, your focus has been outward on them, on what they said, what they did, what they might do next. You've spent months, maybe years, trying to figure out why they acted the way they did. But this next part, it's about you. Because the real shift, the one that sets you free, isn't about learning to trust other people again. It's about learning to trust yourself. And I know what you're thinking. Mel, I already thought I did. But here's the truth. If you've been in the orbit of a narcissist, your sense of self-trust has been quietly dismantled. Piece by piece. They taught you to second-guess your memory. They taught you to doubt your instincts. They trained you to believe that their approval was proof that you were okay. And over time, you stopped listening to your own signals. That's what manipulation does. It doesn't just steal your energy, it steals your confidence in your perception. And that's why this moment matters so much. Because now you get to build it back. You start small. When you feel that gut reaction, that twinge of discomfort when something feels off, you stop brushing it away. You listen. You validate it. You trust that inner voice that says, something isn't right. That's your intuition. That's your internal compass. It's not broken, it's bruised. And like any muscle, it strengthens every time you use it. Here's what I tell people all the time. Healing isn't about becoming harder. It's about becoming clearer. And clarity doesn't mean you stop trusting people. It means you start filtering who's earned that trust through the wisdom you gained. When someone shows you a red flag, you don't make excuses anymore, you make decisions. When someone disrespects your boundary, you don't debate it, you detach. That's not cold, that's confidence. And listen, this isn't about being perfect. You'll still doubt yourself sometimes. You'll still overthink. That's okay. The difference is, this time, you'll catch it. You'll say, wait, I don't need to explain myself to feel safe. I just need to trust what I feel. That's the psychological flip, when your peace matters more than their approval. When you stop asking, can I trust them? And start asking, can I trust me to act when I see the truth? That question changes everything. Because self-trust is the foundation of freedom. It's the anchor that keeps you steady when people try to pull you off balance. So from this moment forward, I want you to remember this one sentence. My peace is proof that I made the right choice. If a conversation, a relationship, or a promise costs you your peace, it's too expensive. And when you honor that truth, you stop betraying yourself to stay connected to anyone else. That's what self-trust looks like, in action, quiet, firm, grounded. It's not about never being hurt again. It's about never abandoning yourself again. All right, let's turn all of this awareness into action. Because insight without application just becomes another form of waiting. You've seen the traps, you've felt the patterns. Now it's time to retrain your brain to trust you again. And that starts right here with something I call the 7-day trust detox. 7 days, one small commitment each day. Because healing isn't about doing everything. It's about doing one thing consistently until you start to believe in yourself again. Day 1, write down the traps. List every pattern you now see clearly. The pity hooks, the confusion, the promises that never came true. Get them out of your head and onto paper. Because the moment you name it, you separate it from you. You stop carrying it as identity and start seeing it as information. Day 2, track the triggers. Every time you feel that familiar rush, the urge to defend, explain, or prove, pause. Write down what triggered it. No judgment, just awareness. Because awareness is the foundation of change. Day 3, practice the 5-second counter. Today, the only goal is to use the countdown. When that text comes in, when that anxiety hits, when you feel the pull to react, count R, E, then breathe. That's it. You're teaching your nervous system that safety comes from pause, not performance. Day 4, replace rumination with reflection. Instead of replaying old conversations, ask yourself this: What did I ignore the first time? Every time you do this, you move from guilt to growth. You turn the past into data instead of a dwelling place. Day 5, set a micro boundary. Pick one small boundary you'll enforce today. Maybe it's not replying to a text immediately. Maybe it's saying no without explaining. Maybe it's ending a draining call after 10 minutes. You don't have to start big. You just have to start different. Day 6, celebrate the calm moments. Notice how your body feels when you don't react. That stillness, that quiet, that's not emptiness, that's peace. Write down 3 moments today when you felt calm instead of chaotic. You're retraining your brain to recognize calm as safety. Day 7, reclaim the narrative. Now, look back over the week. You've slowed down. You've paused. You've protected your energy. That's not luck, that's leadership. Write this line at the bottom of your page. I'm not learning how to control them. I'm learning how to lead myself. That's the detox. Simple, intentional, doable. Because the truth is, healing doesn't happen in one big moment. It happens in hundreds of small decisions to choose peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-trust over self-doubt. Every pause, every boundary, every breath you take before reacting, it's a repon in your emotional gym. And one day soon, you'll realize you're no longer waiting for someone else to give you closure. You've been giving it to yourself all along. That's not just recovery, that's evolution.